Yeah. When we purify our mind to such a high level, then we say we have attained arahantahood. Now the arahantahood that the Buddha attained was exactly the same as the arahantahood that all the other Buddhist saints attained. Now, when the Buddha dies, there is a great question: what happens to the Buddha? And on one occasion at least, when this question was asked the Buddha, do the Buddhas exist after they die? Do the Buddhas not exist after they die? Is there some special place that they go to? The Buddha was non-committal, meaning that the Buddha did not say that there is nothing. You see, it would have been very easy to say that when you attain nirvana and there's no more rebirth, after that it is the hapuskan samaskali. It's not that. At the same time, he does not say that there is something that exists. The reason why he refused to commit himself is because we who have never experienced that are in no position to understand. It would be useless to try and explain the color blue to a blind man. A man who has been blind all his life comes and asks you, what is blue? How are you going to explain? Similarly, there were certain questions that could not be answered by us. All right? And the Buddha's state after death is one of those questions. Okay, so that is why the Maha, the great passing away. All right? Now, the Mahaparinibbana Sutra is contained in the Tripitaka, and it is in the Digha Nikaya. You see, after the Buddha had passed away, 3 months later, all the sutras that the Buddha had uttered were collected into 3 great books. The first book being the Vinaya, that means the 227 rules for the monks, that is the Vinaya Pitaka. Pitaka meaning basket. So first collection is the Vinaya. The second collection is the Sutra. All the teachings, all the talks, all the discourses that the Buddha gave were collected into the Sutra Pitaka. And that again was divided into the long discourses, the short discourses, and the middle discourses. All right? And those 3 discourses together form the second basket, which is the Sutra Pitaka. And then the last one is the higher teachings. What is the teachings that are contained here? The areas relating to the mind and psychology are taken out and then put into a separate section called the Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma, higher teachings. So we have the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutra Pitaka, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka. So these 3 sutras together, these 3 books together, baskets, form the Tripitaka. All right? And our sutra is contained in the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya. All right? And the Digha Nikaya contains a whole lot of very famous sutras, which some of you have heard about, but The Mahaparinibbana Sutra is the longest. It's a very, very, very long. And it goes on and on and on. It's much, much longer than the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, which takes 1 hour to recite. This is even longer. All right. And it is not a sutra in the sense of the other sutras. The other sutras has a beginning, Evam Me Sutam, that's how I heard. The Buddha was residing at Savatthi in Anantapindika's ashram, and on a certain occasion so-and-so came and asked such and such a question, and the Buddha replied in such and such a way. Then that one teaching is recorded in most of the sutras. But this one is a collection of little sutras covering about a year. 1 year of the Buddha's last year. Now, as you know, the Buddha was enlightened, he left the palace at the age of 29. On his 35th birthday, the Buddha was enlightened, and then he started on his mission. 45 years, one of the longest missions of a religious teacher. Yeah, a very, very long mission, 45 years. And in the first sutra, which is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, which he delivers at Sarnath to the 5 disciples, all right? The Buddha gives a very brief explanation, a syllabus of his teachings for the next 45 years. Then he elaborates and elaborates and elaborates. Now, the time has come, he's 80 years old, and the Buddha knows he's going to pass away, and the Buddha now is rounding up. He is going to give his conclusion to the teachings. Now, even just today when I was doing the research for this talk, it just struck me how in Buddhism there is so much of detail. Everything is recorded. Now, 45 years, there are no blanks in the life of the Buddha. Yeah? If you look, for example, this is not to say Buddhism is a better religion, no. This is just to explain to you maybe the Indian mind. But Jesus Christ, yeah, we hear about him at the age of 11, and then from the age of 11 right through to the age of 29, there is a blank. We don't know what happened. All right? And then he teaches for 3 years, and then he is crucified. So a very short period of teaching. The Prophet Muhammad also not as long and not as carefully recorded the lives. Probably this has to do with the Indian tradition of recording every incident. All right? And immediately after the Buddha's death, yeah, all 500 arahants were assembled, and they put together all the teachings. Not only the teachings, but the events that led to the teaching, which is why we can reconstruct year by year the life of the Buddha. Where he was, when he fell sick, when Devadatta attacked him, yeah, when he visited his father for the first time after getting his enlightenment. Every single thing is recorded. All right? The only thing we don't have are exact dates. But a lot of events happened in Indian history. And thereby, by studying Indian history, you can place these events in time. All right? Now, 583 to 463 BC. The Buddha was born 583. He died 463 BCE. 80 years. All right? It goes backwards, as you know. All right? Now, to come to the sutra itself. So it's a collection, it is a record of the Buddha's journey to the north. In his 79th year, yeah, we see him moving from the south, yeah, Rajagaha, which is a very famous city, yeah. From Rajagaha, he moves up north and finally ends up, I think he travels from about 200 to 300 miles until he reaches Kusinagara. Yeah? And the story itself is a very dramatic, very exciting story which will make a lovely movie starting from the last thing. And as interesting as the Buddha is his attendant Ananda. Ananda, Venerable Ananda, yeah, came to serve the Buddha and served him for almost 25 years as his personal attendant. When he took over the job as an attendant, Venerable Ananda asks one special boon, and that special boon is whatever the Buddha teaches, yeah, if the Ananda is not present, yeah, if Venerable Ananda is not present when the Buddha is teaching something, the Buddha must repeat it to him. All right? And Venerable Ananda had a fantastic memory. Venerable Ananda himself says that he remembered 84,000 items. 84,000 items in the Buddha's teaching. It was when the Buddha died that it was Venerable Ananda who was responsible for remembering most of the teachings and for putting it. And what we have today is almost directly due to the Venerable Ananda himself. All right? But this last journey, Venerable Ananda plays a very important role. This we have to remember. Okay? Now, the Buddha's journey begins, as I said, at Rajagaha. All right? And he moves north. All right. When you read this sutra, you see the difference between the Buddha and other religious teachers. You see an old man, a man. You don't see a God. You see a man old. He himself talks of himself as a worn-out cart. He says a kreta belapo. And he says this old, worn-out cart, like a Morris Minor, after 50 years of service, held together with leather straps. You know, he says it's just held together, waiting to give way. The Buddha talks about himself in that manner. So the very human quality of the Buddha comes out. All right? And there is no pretense at glorifying the death of the Buddha. If you go through the Enlightenment, yeah, the description of the Enlightenment, you will see the talk about how Mara was attacked and how there was a big fight and a whole lot of devas come into the picture a lot of supernatural events take place at the Buddha's enlightenment. But when it comes to the 80th year, the death is described in very, very normal human terms, which is a very important lesson for us, which is that the Buddha lived and died as a human being. That we must never forget. He was a superior human being. He was the greatest human being that ever lived. But he was not a god. Yeah? And so his experience can be our experience. All right? So this comes out very clearly in the sutra. Then, the story begins with the Buddha beginning his journey, his last journey at Rajagaha. And at Rajagaha, when the Buddha is there, yeah, a certain king called Ajatasattu. Ajatasattu is enemy before birth. This Ajatasattu was the king of Magadha. Magadha is an area somewhere around here. All right? Now, he had killed his father, King Bimbisara. King Bimbisara was Buddha's friend, yeah? But he had killed his father to take the throne. That is a very exciting story in itself, but we won't go into that story. Ajatasattu's story is a lovely story. Anyway, but Ajatasattu is now king. All right? And he decides to attack another place called the Vajjans, the land of the Vajjis. All right? But before he attacks the Vajjans, he says, is it worth carrying out this or not? All right? So he says, the best person who will tell me, this is the beginning of the Mahaparinibbana Sutra, all right? It's about a year before the death. He says, let us go and ask the Buddha, is it worth wasting our time going to attack the Vajjans, or should we give up? So he sends his minister, and the minister approaches the Buddha, sits very respectfully at one side, and says, Venerable Sir, I have been sent by King Ajatasattu, who incidentally is a historical figure. He says, I want to know, my king wants to know, we are going to attack the Vajjans. Do you think we will succeed? And the Buddha doesn't reply the minister directly. I told you, always remember Venerable Ananda plays a very important role in this Mahaparinibbana Sutra. So the Buddha turns to Ananda and asks him, tell me, Ananda, have you heard anything about the Vajjans? Do you know about the Vajjans? And he says, yes, Lord, I know about the Vajjans. Okay, tell me, do the Vajjans do 7 things? And what are those 7 things? 1, do they hold frequent meetings? Now, this is very important. I'm emphasizing this partly because this was mentioned by Venerable Mahinda on January the 1st when we had that talk. But if a country is to be strong, what must happen? All right? Hold frequent meetings. That means democracy. That people must get together and exchange ideas. Now we are talking about the Buddha 2,500 years ago, telling us that if a nation is to be strong and powerful, and nobody can defeat this nation, they must first have frequent meetings. Secondly, They must meet and disperse in unity. Now, that is not only for kings, but even for our committees. Yeah? We have a whole lot of committees in the temple. One, do we hold frequent meetings? And secondly, do we meet and disperse in friendship? How often do we meet as enemies, fight the whole way through, scream, shout, everything, and then say the 5 precepts and go home and take the phone and say, bloody fool and a bugger, what stupid idiot. I must admit I am also guilty of this to a certain extent. All right? Do we hold frequent meetings? Do we meet and disperse in unity? Yeah? Do we make laws, new laws, frequently? Yeah? Or do we keep changing old laws? Aha. We can't simply change the constitution as and when we like. So the Buddha asked whether the Vajrayans change their constitution as it suits them. No. Right. Do they support and venerate their elders? The Buddha asked. Do the citizens of that country support and venerate their elders? Or do they throw them in old folks' homes? All right? Are the women and the girls respected in the country? Are the women and girls safe in that country? 2,500 years ago. Yeah. Are the places of worship respected? And is there a respect for holy people, the Arahants? Now, there are 7 things that the Buddha asked. Now, if you look at countries in the West which are weakening, which are in a very bad state, many of these don't apply. In many countries in the world, they don't meet and disperse in unity. Yeah? In many countries of the world, women are not respected. In many countries of the world, the elders are not venerated. Many countries of the world, the places of worship are not safe. In all these countries, there is trouble and unhappiness. Right? Now, so the Buddha asks Venerable Ananda, do you know of the Vajrayans? Do they keep these 7 rules? And Venerable Ananda says, my Lord, yes, they keep every one of these rules. And then the Buddha turns to the minister and says, in that case, don't waste your time. Go home. Because there is no way you can defeat the Vajrayans. And the minister thanks the Buddha and respectfully keeping his right shoulder to the Buddha, he goes behind the Buddha and departs and carries the message to Ajatasattu. So that is the first part of the Mahaparinibbana Sutra, which is almost a political statement. Then the Buddha turns to his disciples and he tells Venerable Ananda to call all the monks in the Rajagaha area, assemble them because the Buddha wants to speak to them. And then the Buddha says, now if the Sangha, the community of monks, is to remain strong, they must follow 7 things. And what are those 7 things? Quite close. 1, they must have frequent assemblies. You see, that basic democratic principle that we must meet often to exchange ideas. Monks must meet often. They must meet and disperse in unity. Believe me, not all monks meet and disperse in unity. They cannot change the laws as and when they like. Do they respect and venerate the elder monks? Yeah? Then comes the change. Yeah? He says, they must not fall, yeah, into the trap of getting attached. Attachments arise. We are human. Attachments arise. That's all right. What must not happen is that we hang on to these attachments. So the monks, as long as they don't hold on to attachments, this is my temple, this is my power, this is mine, this is my temple, this is my organization, I did this, I did that. So long as monks do this, they will be weak. So long as they refrain from doing this, the Sangha will remain strong. All right? So long as the monks delight in forest dwellings, so long as the monks love to go and live alone, so long as they love to stay in the forests, so long as they are concerned about their own spiritual development, so long will the Sangha remain strong. Finally, he says, all monks, so long as they remain mindful and practice mindfulness, so long will the Sangha remain strong. Later, in another sutra, the Buddha has predicted that this will not always be so, because the principle of impermanence applies in Buddhism. Everything is impermanent, including the Sangha. A time will come when all these laws will be broken by the Sangha. Yeah? You may have heard about Sangha using credit cards and mobile phones and making babies and all kinds of things. And I'm very embarrassed to say that he was here. He actually sat here and everybody thought he was an arahant. So much for that. You see, so long, but it has to decay. It is not a question of, things are going bad. But the Buddha says that it's in the nature of things to decay. But the Buddha has said that a time will come when a monk will be recognized only by his yellow string. He will stop wearing the robe. It's already happened in the West. Sangharakshita is one good example. He's an ordained monk, first as a Theravada, then as a Mahayana, and now he's in England, a brilliant man, one of the people I really admire, but he lives like a layman. All right? And so they will carry on the Dhamma for some time, and then the natural process of decay must take place. Yeah? But as long as, and we can safely say, at least until Walasan 2020, most of these are being followed in most parts of the world by the Sangha. Some more, some less. All right? Then, the Buddha, then from Rajagaha, comes to Nalanda. Now, I emphasize Nalanda because it's a very, very important place for Buddhism. The world's first university, was established by the Buddhists at Nalanda. That's one. Another very important aspect of that is, in Nalanda University, there were Theravada monks from Sri Lanka, and there were Mahayana monks from China. Fashion is one of them, and Vajrayana monks from Tibet. They all stayed together, studied together, argued together, but lived as friends. There's nothing wrong. The end of the sutra that we are going to talk about talks about why it is necessary to argue about the Dhamma. We cannot simply say, oh, the Buddha said it, therefore we must accept it. Even before he dies, the Buddha warns us that you must never accept simply because he said it. But we'll come to that. But in Nalanda, in that spirit, there's a great deal of argument between Mahayana and Theravada about the different schools. But they always remain friends. They agree to differ. Now that is a very good thing about Buddhist history. All right? Later, of course, Nalanda University gets destroyed. But when the Buddha visits Nalanda, of course the university has not been established, but it's a great city. And Venerable Sariputta is one of his chief disciples. The Buddha had two chief disciples, Sariputta, who was the intellectual one, and Moggallana, who was very good in psychic powers. All right? And he could do a lot of magical things, walk on the water, make wine into water into wine, multiply loaves and fishes. He could do all of these. And I'm not quoting from anywhere. The Buddhist scriptures mention these. All right? He could fly and through windows. He could be in one place and be in another place at the same time. Moggallana could do all of these magic powers he had. Now, these two were the great. But Venerable Sariputta, now the Buddha is almost about to die, and Sariputta also dies just after this. All right? I must mention that at this time, the Buddha's former wife, Yasodhara, has already passed away. His son, Rahula, has also passed away. Moggallana has passed away. After this, Sariputta passes away. So all these great friends of his are all, and only Ananda is left. All right? Anyway, Sariputta looks at the Buddha and he gets excited and he says, Lord, our Buddha, Gautama Buddha, is the greatest Buddha that ever existed. And the Buddha very sternly tells him, how do you know? How do you know that I am the greatest? Do you know the other Buddhas? Oh, well, sorry, I didn't mean that. So the Buddha says, you can I emphasize this point, and I think it has been put in here to emphasize a very important point, that we will never understand the nature of a Buddha. You have to be a Buddha. Sariputta was the closest to Buddha in intelligence. And it is significant that the Buddha points this out to Sariputta, that you are not a Buddha. You cannot understand Buddhahood. You cannot understand the nature of a Buddha. So you cannot say, you cannot even say that all the Buddhas had the same qualities. We simply do not know. All right? The quality of Buddhahood. So the Buddha teaches us that very important lesson. Then he goes up to Pataliputra here. All right? Now Pataliputra still exists, as Patna, and the Buddha visits this city and he predicts that Pataliputra will be a very, very great city. And it is true, because Asoka, the man who is actually responsible for making Buddhism into a world religion, had his capital there. Now that's important. And the Buddha predicts that although it will be a great city, it will always be attacked by fire and water. So he studied the place and found that it was not a very nice place to build a city. But he predicts that, not so important. What is important is two great generals, Sumedha and Vasakara. The Buddha comes, and when they see the Buddha approaching, they say this is such an honor that the gate by which the Buddha enters will be called the Gautama gate. See? Pintu Gautama. So to commemorate the entry of the Buddha. All right? Then the Buddha stays there for some time, and they decide, all right, when the Buddha leaves, the place by which he leaves the river, he has to cross the river. The point at which he crosses the river, we will call it the Gautama Ford. Now, but the Buddha approaches, and while the people are waiting for him to take off, get into the boat and go across, the Buddha suddenly disappears, and when they look, he's already on the other side. Now, what is important is that the Buddha also was capable of magic power. But he never used it, except on this occasion, because he didn't want this place to commemorate him. He was not interested in this kind of commemorations. All right? He didn't want archers and things, because that's not what he wants, because later on he's going to tell us that if you want to honor me, then honor my teaching, follow my teaching. All these building statues and pillars and all of this is not what I am looking for. So he crosses over and he leaves Nalanda. All right? Then he goes the next lot. He goes to a little town called Kotigama, a very little village, and Venerable Ananda back again. Now, I think I have to stop here and remind you, look, I'm telling stories. It's called a sutra, but there is very little Dhamma teaching as such. And it is actually an odyssey. It is a travel story of the Buddha. So the last thing, because you see, I think the early fathers, they were very impressed by this event, that they were very, very emotionally involved in this event. I am told, I haven't been, but every single person who has gone to Kusinara, where the Buddha died, including that Venerable Sangharakshita I said, every single person who has gone to Kusinara to see the place where the Buddha died has simply broken down and cried. 2,600 years later, the power is so strong there. That you see, and this I think is the purpose of the Mahaparinibbana Sutra, to keep alive this very important year in the Buddha's life. That you know the three events, the birth, the enlightenment, and now the death, which is very little talked about, which is why I thought it would be interesting for you to share this with me. So he is now at Kotigama, and Venerable Ananda, again Ananda, asks the Buddha, Venerable Sir, a number of people have died recently in this village. Could you tell us what has happened to them? And they mention these names, and the Buddha says, well, this guy, he has become a stream winner. That means a Sotapanna. He has just entered the first stage of sainthood. So-and-so has entered a second stage of sainthood, and so on. Then finally the Buddha says, look, this is very tiring. This is me telling you where those so-and-so was born, what has happened to so-and-so. It's not really Dhamma. But I will give you, very important, mirror of the Dhamma. Now this is a phrase we always use, the mirror of the Dhamma. I will give you a few tips to see for yourself. You can tell for yourself whether you have done the right thing or not, whether you have actually stepped onto the right path, whether you are on the right track. And that, I think, is important for us. And he says, the first thing, the first test is, do you have complete faith in the Buddha? And then in the sutra it repeats, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijaya Charana Sampanno Sugato Lokavedu Anuttaro Purusha Dhamma Sarati Satta Deva Manusana. That's the first verse we utter when we say our gathas. Alright? The Buddha says, if you can, have an unshakable faith in the Buddha, then this is the first test that you are on the right path towards attaining the first stage of sainthood. Alright? Then he says the second stage, of course, is do you have unshakable faith in the Dhamma? Have you got unshakable faith in the Dhamma? And then the second verse that we always say. And then the third test is, do you have unshakable faith in the Sangha? Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Eipasiko Upanayako Pachatang Veditabbo Vinyu Iti. That is the Dhamma. And how is the third one? Supatipanno. Savaka Sango Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakhineyo Anjali Karaniyo. Now, we say these verses, all right? Now, I mentioned this mirror of the Dhamma. It is not enough to mention. Any tape recorder can do that. When you say Itipiso, the 9 virtues of the Buddha, how much trouble do we take to understand the Buddha and know why we have faith in the Buddha? Do we know why we have faith in the Buddha? Or do we have faith in the Buddha because when you go through a cemetery, we will save? You see? The 9 virtues, study those 9 virtues. Each of them is a separate quality which we have to study. The Dhamma, same thing. Alright? And when you have studied these, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, I must explain that Sangha here does not simply mean the order of monks. Sangha here has a deeper meaning. And that deeper meaning is all the monks who have attained Arahantahood, the higher level of the Sangha. Alright? The present Sangha is also connected with them. But when we say we have faith in the Sangha, we are specifically talking about the Arahants. They are the Sangha of the higher order. So, do we have faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha? If we have, then this is the mirror which tells us that we are on the right track. And where did this happen? At at Kotigama. Alright? Now the Buddha is moving north, slowly, step by step. Alright? And to predict whether you will be born in a happy state or an unhappy state. Do you have faith in these three? Alright? And faith is not simply saying it. Do you completely live that faith? Okay? Right. Then he moves further north to a town called Vesali or Vesali. And Vesali is important because this is where a courtesan are like the geisha girls in Japan. They are trained artists whose training is to in the art of entertainment. All right? Exactly like the geisha. Not necessarily prostitutes, they are not. All right? But their art is that of entertainment. Now, she was very, very rich and very, very highly accomplished. Her name was Ambapali. Amba is mango. All right? And so she had this name of Mango Girl. All right? Anyway, Ambapali hears that the Buddha has arrived at Vesali, and she goes up to the Buddha and invites him for a meal, a dana. And the Buddha, by silence, accepts. All right? Now, and Ambapali is so thrilled that she goes up and she starts preparing straight away for the next day. In the meantime, some Lichavi princes. Lichavis are Greek blood. All right? They are very, very beautiful people. All right? And 500 of them come to visit the Buddha to invite him to accept dana the following day. So there is this problem. The Buddha has already accepted Ambapali. So he says, no, I can't accept. All right? So they go back to Ambapali and tell Ambapali, look, we will pay you. We will pay you what you want, you ask. And Ambapali says, this again is very important. Why? Because the importance of dana. A lot of us so-called intellectuals say, oh no, these things all, the monks are already fed so much, they eat like pigs anyway, and why should I feed them some more when there are hundreds of people who are starving in Ethiopia? I prefer to give it to the Ethiopia. I prefer to give it to the old folks' home. Lots of people say that. But in Buddhism, this is the Ambapali story. No, there is a difference. The reason when we give dana to an old person or a beggar, that's good. All right? But when the beggar has got strength from your food, how does he use that strength? Probably he just goes and does some work, like digging or whatever. On the other hand, ahara, when you give food, this is called field of merit. When you give food to a monk, the monk gets sustenance. The monk can live for another day. In that period that he is sustained by your food, he is able to teach the Dhamma. That's the difference. Because the gift of Dhamma excels all other gifts. All right? And when we support
and of course, giving food to the monks is at one level. But if you give food to the Buddha, then the field of merit is incredibly vast. So Ambapali says, you can ask me, you can pay me everything. No way am I going to give up this opportunity. Because you might say that this has happened to us many times. Last year I was going to give a dana, and we had a very tight schedule. My children were coming from Australia. We had only that one day, Saturday. Then, of course, Jimmy Chan rings me up and he says, Vijaya, please can you give me that date because my grandson's naming day, so I need that day for that. And I spoke to my wife and my wife said, look, that is dana too. Giving up your day is also dana. And we said, yes, okay, no problem. So last year we were not able to give a dana. Now, question is, should I have been like Ambapali and said, not for all the world, Jimmy, am I going to give you my day? But that's not the point. We don't argue about that. The lesson we learn from here is how important it is to give a dana to the Buddha. And then, of course, the holier the person, the more useful the person, the more merit your dana gives you. It's okay. Then Amrapali, of course, after that she joins the order and she eventually becomes an Arahant. But that's another story. So that is Amrapali's story. Then comes the sad part. If you are telling this story over Radio Malaya, this is where the music will start coming in. One more thing I want to tell you, also important, because when the Lichavis approached the Buddha, 500 of them, they got out of their cart, and those who were wearing blue clothes had blue makeup, those who were wearing red clothes had red makeup and red jewelry, and those who had pink, and all of them approaching the Buddha. And the Buddha looks at them and he tells the monks, if you want to know what the gods in the heavens look like, look at these Lichavi princes. The lesson I learned from that is that, number one, the Devas do exist. Number two, that the Devas who exist are very, very beautiful people. And the Buddha says that this is what the people in the heaven look like. And then it is now the sad part of it, the Buddha falls sick. The Buddha falls sick, he is already 80 years old, and he falls sick. And because, although he falls sick, because of his mind over matter, because he's an Arahant, and because he knows the time is not right yet, the Buddha controls his sickness. To me that is important because we don't need doctors to control sickness. Sickness is a necessary part of living. When you are born, you must fall sick, so that you cannot fight. And what it says is that the pain can be controlled by mind power, which the Buddha does. Then he recovers. He falls sick, he recovers. And Venerable Ananda is very, very happy about this. And Venerable Ananda says, I'm very happy that you have recovered. And now he says, when you were sick, what worried me? You are 80 years old. What worries me is who is going to replace you? Very important in Buddhism too, because we have no pope. We have no successor to the Buddha. And this is where it happens. And the Buddha says, what does the Sangha expect of me? I have taught them everything. And because he says, Ananda was worried that once the Buddha has died, there will be no one to continue teaching. Alright? And don't forget, Ananda was not an Arahant at that time, alright? And so he asked, to my mind, rather silly questions sometimes. Alright? And the Buddha pulls him up for it. Now he says, when you are gone, who's going to continue teaching? And the Buddha says, what does the Sangha expect of me? I have never held anything back. There is nothing esoteric or exoteric. Esoteric, you know the old Indian and Chinese way of teaching, you always keep one secret back so that your pupil will not kill you. Alright? Even in Malay movies, you see, always the Mahaguru has the laugh. Alright? And the Buddha said, I never held a closed fist in my teaching. Esoteric. Alright? So what more is there to teach? Everything that needs to be taught has been taught. Alright? Therefore, do not expect anybody to take over. The Dhamma has been taught. That is going to be your guide from now on. Which is why even today we place so much emphasis on the Dhamma, on the correct teaching of the Dhamma. Because that is the Buddha now. That is the representative of the Buddha. There is no human representative. Alright? And esoteric. Then, again, to round up his teaching, the Buddha talks about mindfulness. Because to a Buddhist, that is the most important thing, mindfulness. That whatever you are doing, standing, walking, sleeping, urinating, you have to be mindful. And that is the one thing that makes you aware. Right? And the second thing that the Buddha emphasizes at this point is individual striving. That no matter how much others can help you, no matter how much chanting and whatever, if you do not put in your own effort, there is nobody who can help. Prayer cannot help you. Faith in the Buddha cannot help you. You must have personal effort. And this, I think, is one strong characteristic of Buddhism, that you have to put in. Nobody can do it for you. All right? The doctor can prescribe, but you must take the medicine. All right? Now, then they come to a place called Chappala Chaitya, and this is an important place. Chappala Chaitya And here, the Buddha says he could live for an eon. An eon, if you look at the dictionary, is an incalculable period of time. Millions of years is an eon. But here they translate that. They say that's not what the Buddha meant. Here it means 100 years. The Buddha tells Ananda, I could live for 100 years plus. So the Buddha implies I could live up to 120. Right? Ananda keeps quiet. Second time, the Buddha repeats. Ananda doesn't understand. Third time, the Buddha says it. Ananda does not understand. Now, why do I say this? The Buddha says I could live for 120 years. Ananda tutup mulut, tak buat apa-apa. I say this because after the Buddha's passing away, all the others got hold of Ananda and said, you stupid fool, why didn't you ask the Buddha at that point to live for another 40 years? Tak terlintas kepala. But the commentary says that Mara blocked Ananda's request. So it passes. And then the opportunity is gone to request the Buddha to live for another 40 years. Alright? Now, we'll continue the story from there. Alright. Then later on, the Buddha predicts, then he goes for his bath. It's now time for the rainy period. And then the Buddha says, alright, now I have to make an announcement. I am going to pass away in 3 months' time. Now, that is why we call it the Mahaparinibbana. Mahaparinibbana, none of us can predict that we are going to pass away tomorrow or the day after. All right? We know we will die, but when, nobody can predict. In the Buddha's case, however, the Buddha says 3 months from now, I am going to pass away. All right? To give an opportunity for anybody who wants to come and ask questions. All right? At that point, Ananda says, please Lord, please don't go away, please stay on. And the Buddha says, sorry, the time for asking is past. You cannot ask anymore. All right? And Ananda was feeling very, very bad about it, but that is the way it is. So the Buddha could have willed. So this is why, you see, it is not an ordinary death. In an ordinary death, you have no control. But the Buddha knows, 45 years, I've done my teaching, there is nothing more for me to continue. All right? And then, this is very important. Then he goes to a place called Baddhagama, and at Baddhagama, he makes 4 great references. The 4 great references are, now, okay, I'm going to die. I'm not going to leave a successor. There's not going to be an authority. All right? But if you want to test whether something is right or wrong, I give you 4 hints. 1, if somebody comes and tells you this is the Buddha's teaching, or if you have heard it from the Buddha, do not accept, do not reject. Just now before the talk started, we were talking about this. The Buddha says of his own teaching, this is the greatness of Buddhism, you neither accept nor must you reject. All right? But you must study it thoroughly. If somebody says the Buddha taught this, don't reject, don't accept, but study it thoroughly. Don't say, oh, if Buddha says it must be true. Study it thoroughly. Then, when you have consulted every possible, then you make up your mind about the Buddha's teaching. Then it could be said that a member of the Sangha has said this, a great saint in the Buddhist teaching has said this. Don't accept, don't reject. Maybe there is a very famous Thera, elder, Venerable Dhammananda Nayaka Mahathera says it. Don't accept, don't reject. Take it home, study it, challenge. At any time in Buddhism are you free to challenge anything, not out of arrogance, but out of humility. I don't understand. This does not seem right. And vitally important because the Buddha emphasizes it just before he dies. How important it is we must not accept things because it is demanded of us out of faith. And finally he says if there is a very learned bhikkhu who says something, do not accept, do not reject, but study it thoroughly before you make up your mind. Always keep an open mind. And then finally the Buddha arrives at Kusinara. And at the Kusinara he accepts a meal from a blacksmith called Chunda. He accepts a meal. according to the text, we still haven't cleared this point, that it is supposed to be wild boar. All right? Now, some say it is not wild boar, the Buddha wouldn't have eaten meat. Some say it was a kind of mushroom that tastes like, looks like a pig's ear. Yeah? And we don't know what it is, but the Buddha ate this. And he knew that if he eats this, it was bad for him. But the time had come. So he eats it mindfully. Right? Then he instructs the rest of it to be buried. Nobody must touch that, the remainder of that food. So it is buried, and the Buddha starts then getting dysentery. All right? And a very, very bad attack of dysentery. And the last bit is so sad. He is in a little village just outside of Kusinara, and it's only 6 miles. 6 miles would be from here to about the bridge, the arch. You know, that separates KL from PJ, that PJ arch. That will be about 6 miles, won't it? And or maybe up to EPS. Anyway, he had to stop 25 times. And it was easier for people to carry him. But no, he walked. But he walked 25 times, he had to stop. Which, to me, is a drama. Okay? The effort of an old man suffering from dysentery, a man, not a god, who had given so much, and yet he refuses to use his supernatural powers. But he carries his suffering like a man, which is the example we have to take. If the Buddha could do this suffering, why can't we? Mindfully. Right? He refuses to let it go. Then he goes, and then people ask him, when he dies, what Ananda asked him how to honor him. That's why he says, if you want to honor me, follow my teaching. That's the only way to honor me. But there are other ways of honoring me. One, there are 4 places that have to be honored. One, his birthplace, Kapilavastu, his birthplace. His enlightenment, Vijaya. His first sermon, Sarna. And his Parinibbana, Kusinara. Emperor Asoka, he learned about this 200 years after the Buddha's death, and he made all these places, he made these places into holy sites, all right? So that even today we can visit them. I think at the moment, I think there's one group from here who is now visiting these 4 places. So to honor the Buddha, then of course there are other things that you can do, the tree, yeah, and the vihara. These are things that you can venerate to honor the Buddha. And finally, there is a man, the last convert. The last convert of the Buddha is a Brahmin called Subhadda, and he has some questions. He comes to ask the Buddha. Ananda says, look, he's sick, he's tired, enough. Please let him rest. The Buddha overhears him and says, no. Even at the very, very last moment, the Buddha says, allow him to come. If he has a doubt, I will clear the doubt for him. All right? And the Buddha clears the doubt, and Subhadda becomes accepted, and he wants to become a monk. All right? Normally in those days, you have to be ordained by a senior monk, and then 4 months probation. But the Buddha says, I waive that. You don't need the probation. But Subhadda says, no, I want to follow the probation. Then the Buddha says to Ananda, all right, ordain him. So that is the last monk ordained by the Buddha. Again, the detail. Yeah, every step of the way it's recorded. And then the Buddha is now ready to pass away. He lies down between two flowering trees, sala trees, all right, mindfully on his right side. Yeah, and you always see the statues of the Buddha, all right, lying down with his head like that, and mindfully in great pain, he goes into his jhanas. Yeah, he goes from the first, and then he keeps going up, 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 then he comes down, 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 up, 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 and finally passes away. All right? And at one point, Ananda, who is not an Arahant, thinks that the Buddha is still alive. But an Arahant tells him, no, he's just gone. All right? And then after the Buddha passed away, I will share a little story with you. This boy is still alive. He's in Sri Lanka. About 25 years ago, he was a little boy, about 5 years old, and in a village in Sri Lanka, totally remote village. And this boy could suddenly sit down and recite the sutras. He would just sit down there and he'll recite the sutras non-stop. Yeah? And people were wondering what this was. And he became Chief Reverend has his tapes. Right? And this boy, Venerable Narada is the one who wrote this book, a great scholar monk of Sri Lanka. He went to visit this boy. And this boy, 5 years old, the most senior monk in Sri Lanka approaches, in Sri Lanka, I mean, and you know how respectful they are. In a village, a monk enters, and this boy calls him by his name. And Narada says, oh? And the boy says, don't you recognize me? Narada says, no, but don't you remember? I was sitting in front of you during the cremation of the Buddha. I was sitting behind you, in front of you, while the Buddha was being cremated. Don't you remember? Now the point of that is, when our chief quite easily explained, he was there. But when he died, he didn't get reborn in this world. He got reborn in another plane, in a Deva world, where one day is our 2,000 years. Alright? So he spent time there while Narada was going through samsara. He stayed put, then he was reborn. This guy completely lost it when he was about 8 or 9. Now he's working in a bank or something. He didn't even become a monk, you know. He didn't even become a monk. I saw, when Mahinda showed me a photograph of him wearing a suit and a tie. But you see that link, that connection. You don't have to believe that because the Buddha says, don't reject, don't accept, but study. But I thought it's a nice way to end the talk, that, you know, to bring it down to today. I hope I was of some use bringing to you the Mahaparinibbana Sutra. And yes, pass away. Yes, all the Buddha pass away in this Kushirana. That is one question I cannot answer, and the question is, do all Buddhas pass away in Kusinara? One. Another question is, do all Buddhas get enlightenment at Vijaya? And they say yes, but I feel somehow in the deep down inside of me, don't reject, don't accept, that I think this is a little bit of Indian chauvinism. That I think in those days they said that the Buddha has to be born in Jambudvipka, in India, in that same spot. No, I suppose it could have something to do with cosmic influences. Like, you know, the pyramids in Egypt. They are not just simply thrown there. There are scientific reasons for their positioning, and Stonehenge in England. So similarly, there could be something which is beyond us. Right? But I prefer to remain open on that question, whether that next Buddha is going to die in Kusinara. But I do know that the next Buddha will be enlightened under a banyan tree. Our Buddha was enlightened under a bo tree. The next one will be a banyan tree. Maitreya Buddha will be enlightened under a bodhi tree. And I hope we'll be there. But as the Buddha would warn us, these are not things that lead to edification. Yeah? If there are no more questions, can we just spend just 1 minute calming our minds before we quiet by yourselves. Just before we break off, just go over in your mind some of the things that I told you so that it gets fixed. Not necessarily critically, but just chronologically. Thank you, brothers and sisters. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you always.